Okay, hi everyone. So what we were learning yesterday in the laws of Yerusha for a firstborn is that a firstborn gets a double portion only of the muhzak, only of the property that is in the estate physically at the time of death. But he doesn't get a double portion in the ro'oi, things that will come to the estate afterwards, but are not currently in the possession of the estate. So when you're dealing with a loan, so a loan is ro'oi, it's not present in the estate, it's just owed to the estate. And therefore, the Bechor will not get a double portion. But then we saw yesterday, Ule'inyan ha'she'ela ba'ofen sha'aviv hilva beheter iska, ha'im ha'bechor yekabel bo pi shnayim olo. He says, but as far as a loan that was given on interest, so we know that you're not allowed to lend money on interest. So we do something called a heter iska, which structures the giving of cash to the borrower in such a way. Half of the giving of the cash is a loan, and the other half is an investment. And the giver of the cash is guaranteed a return only on the half of the amount of money that is the investment, but he's not getting any interest on the other half that is the loan. So we look at the amount that he's given as the investment as being part of his possession. It's almost like it's in the bank, so to speak, and it's his. And so therefore, he says the Bechor would get a double portion on that half, but he would not get a double portion. So if the father before he died lent out $1 million from the estate, only half of that, and it was on interest, so only half of that, $500,000 the Bechor would get a double portion, on the other half he would not. Okay, so that's what we saw yesterday. Omnam, however, yesh makom lomar shebimikre zeh gam chelek hahalva nechshav lemuchzak v'yekabel habechor pishnayim. He says, but there's another way to look at it, and the other way to look at it is that maybe the Bechor should get a double portion on the entire amount that was lent out. Why? She'iska lo doma l'chol halva, because an iska type of loan is not like other loans. Ki b'halva rashai halova lihishtamish b'kesef l'chol tzirachav. He says because in the case of a regular loan, the borrower can use the money as he pleases. It's completely his for a certain period of time. Ein mi yomar lo ma ta'aseh u'ma tif'al. No one can tell him, do this or don't do that with the money. Ma she'en kein be'iska hu yachol lihishtamesh b'chelek shel ha'alva rak le'matarat ha'esek. However, in an iska loan, the borrower is only permitted to use even the loan part for the sake of the investment business that he has set up, this legal fiction that he set up. And therefore, in one respect, there's a way of looking at it that even the other half, that's the loan, is completely within the purview and the control of the lender, and therefore it's part of the estate. On the other hand, you might say that the entire amount that was lent out is not considered to be muhzak, is not considered to be part of the estate, because it still isn't physically present and still needs to be collected. And therefore, he says, because there's this ambiguity as far as how we view this halachically, ulahalacha nira lipso kisvara harishona, shahachetzi milva nechshav roi, v'hachetzi pikadu nechshav kemuchzak barak bo yekabel habechor pishnai. And therefore, it seems to me, Reb Sharaga says, that there are three different ways of viewing this. I go like the first way, which to view it, half of the loan is considered to be part of the estate, and therefore he gets a double portion. And the other half is considered outside of the estate at the time of death, and therefore the Bechor only gets one portion. Amnam ha-Bechor yitol pishnayim mechelek הפיקדון דווקא לפי הערך שחלק הפיקדון היה שווה בשעת פטירת אביו. He says, however, the double portion that the Bechor gets from that half that was the investment is only based on what its value is at the time of death. ולא ממה שנתווסף ערך הפיקדון לאחר מכן, and not its accrual to its final amount that accrues after the death of the testator. Ki harivachim shenitafsu la'achar haptira nechshavim kiraoi l'kulei alma. Because those returns that come back on that investment amount that come back after death, everyone agrees that that's not part of the estate at the time of death. So therefore, in any investment, right? So if a person at the time of his death had an interest-bearing account, you have to look at the dollar amount that it's worth at the time of death and give the Bechor the double portion of that. It could be that it takes 6 months, or it could be, let's say, a stock or something like that. 6 months later, the stock may be worth twice that amount, but the Bechor only gets what its value is at the time of death, as far as the double portion. B'chol zerak le'inyan misha asa heter iska im chavero, aval le'inyan heter iska she'osim im habank. He says, now this, up until now, what we've discussed is a heter iska that a person does with a private individual. But the heter iska that you do with the bank, now, I don't know if you know this, but when you open up a bank account, if it's an interest-bearing bank account in Israel, you sign heter iska. Yeah, it's in the fine print of
even if it's nowhere near the street.
This is nothing to do.
This is loan.
This is interest. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So because the bank is Jewish owned, yeah, even if it's a corporate entity, I guess in a sense it's Jewish owned. So that's how they get around it. So Kosov B'shut Shevet Halevi Libo Mahaseis Ba'ofen Zeh Ulai Gam Chelak HaPikadon Shebe'iska Nechshav Kiroi. So the Rav Vosner in Shevet Halevi says that he's not really sure. He's hesitant to say that the half that's a loan is really a loan. In other words, what happens is that you give the bank your money, and they give you interest on, let's say, a 1%, 2% interest on your savings account. He says he's not so sure that even though you signed on a heter iska, where they view half, where technically the Gemara says you view half of it as a loan and half of it as an investment, he doesn't think that. He says ulai gam chelak hapikadon shebe'iska nechshav kiroi. He says it could be that even the half that's the investment is outside of the estate. Why? Because kibali habanking mashkim et hakesef umotzim umachlifim hamos ke'avat nafsham velo elu hamot shehishir avihim. Because the bank does whatever it wants with your money once you give it to them. There's no one that can tell them. You can only direct the money towards the business interest that I signed on. Ve'alkein misapek ein ve'alkein misafek ein lebechor litol pishnaim klal me'iska shebebank. And therefore, any kind of interest-bearing account that has accrued interest over the course of time, the Bechor does not get a double portion on any bank account that bears interest in the bank.
But wouldn't that give you a portion of the bank's business plan, irrespective of what the
Yeah, but it's too apparently this is too fictional, because the bank will never listen to you. Whereas in a situation of a private loan, at least in theory, you have some level of control. Voting shares in a bank still doesn't give you control. That doesn't allow you to dictate to them how they're going to use the money that you gave them.
Right?
Yeah.
So would they get, if there was 100 shares, would they get double the portion of that share as part of it? Is that how it would work, or would they have to go back to it?
Yeah, well, yeah, but you'd have to take a look at what the value of those shares were at the time of death. Yeah, right.
By dollars as opposed to actual quantities.
That's right. That's right.
Is there any hold by this system? No? All the rabbis, black and white, this is the way.
Yeah, this is from the Gemara. Yeah. It was invented by the rabbis, this Iska. There's nothing in the Torah about it, because the Torah simply says you can't lend money on interest to another Jew. And the rabbis saw that this was not working within Jewish society. Right? People were not lending money. People simply were not lending money. So just like in the case of Shemitah, like Paul you're making reference to, they created the Prusbul. They also created the Heter Iska to promote people lending money. I mean, I suppose just like, the Eruv is an accommodation for Shabbos, and there are some people who are machmir and they don't hold of the Eruv. No one's telling you that you have to lend money on interest using an ISKA document. You can also lend money without interest. In other words, if I have a friend who says, I need to borrow $10,000 and I don't need that money, and I have enough, let's say, personal wealth that even if you don't accrue interest on that $10,000, I'll be okay. And I want to do a chesed. There's no obligation to do an iska, right? My friend, he says, I need $10,000 for a year. Take it, use it, be happy. I'm only getting 0.5%, let's say, interest from the bank anyway. It's no big deal. So use it in good health. You give it back to me when things are better in your life, and then showing that's what you have to. You should draw up a document. You have to, like we learned before when we learned. I forget which sefer we learned. You do have to. Maybe it was Imre Yaakov. You do have an obligation to draw up an IOU. It has to be signed by the borrower. You have to hold on to it and then relinquish that document upon the repayment of the loan, even if you trust the guy implicitly. Right. So again, it's when you say, do all the rabbis hold of it? Yeah, but it's an accommodation to a situation where if you didn't have this option, you wouldn't lend money. But if you're in a position to lend money without this, then obviously it's better to not charge interest. If you have a friend, right? That's the whole idea. That why did the Torah create the mitzvah in the first place? That you're not allowed to lend money on interest, because it's ruinous. In other words, people don't realize it, but when you have to pay interest on a loan, you dig yourself deeper and deeper into a hole. And out of compassion to one's fellow Jew, the Torah says, don't allow your friend to dig himself deeper and deeper into a hole because you've lent him money. Make sure that you give him a way out, give him a way to pay back the loan without causing him financial ruin. That was the whole idea behind it. Okay. And like many other mitzvot in the Torah, when it's not being used, when people are not complying with the spirit of the Torah, and they're only complying with the letter of the law, and not complying with the spirit of the law, if it's done on a whole societal level, because poverty has crept into society, and people just simply can't afford to do that that kind of chesed, because people are just scraping by. The rabbis made an accommodation that poor Jews in Gullus one of the ways they make their money is through interest-bearing loans because they can't own real estate, they can't do this, they can't do that. This is people's bread and butter. That's how they make a living. What about my fellow Jew who needs a loan? I can't afford you to lend you money without interest. How am I going to live? So therefore, they made this accommodation. Okay.
Why don't you just say the whole thing is an investment? Why does that have to be a 50-50 deal with the bank? Is it always 50-50?
Well, the answer is, yeah, it's a good question. The answer is because a business investment, in theory, if it goes bad, there's no such thing as guaranteeing a return on a real business investment. I think that's the reason, is that when you deposit money in a bank, you are lending it to them in every real sense of the word, because they are guaranteeing to you to give you the money back plus a return on that money. So it's not a real business investment in that sense. When I invest money in your company, if your company loses money, I lose money also. So I think that's the reason why it was structured this way in the first place. It's a legal fiction, but there has to be some semblance of truth to it as well, in order for it to take effect. I guess you have this in secular law as well, sure. That yeah. Okay. All right. Now, even without the question of an interest-bearing account, what about just a regular, let's say, a checking account, which may not be interest-bearing at all? Does a bechor have the rights of a double portion based on this shaila that we raised before? On the one hand, it's money in the bank. So when we say that phrase, it's money in the bank, it means like it's guaranteed that it's yours. And so therefore you could view it as muhsak, but on the other hand, it's not in the house. In other words, you still have to go to the bank and wait for them to open up on Monday morning to get the cash. So, and you have to sign papers and transfers and of ownership and things like that. So it's really not in the estate. So does the bechor get a double portion or not? Hine kosav haginas vradim da'af alpi shehakesef shenimsa bebank nechshav lebituach yoter mehalva'a regila. That he writes that even though money in the bank is more securely yours than the money that you give as a loan, he says, but nonetheless, since it's not literally in the possession of the decedent, but rather is in the possession of the bank and needs to still be collected from the bank, therefore, and therefore it's not considered to be in the possession of the testator at the time of death. And therefore it's considered to be a roy and not muchsak. It's considered to be not literally in the possession, and therefore the bechor will never get a double portion of the money that's in the bank, regardless of whether it's interest bearing or not, according to this opinion. Avol, the Sefer Tivuot Shemesh, Lahagrash Mashash, who's a Sephardi posek, he says, Kosav Sha'akesef Shebebankim Hayom, Emo din halva'a ela din pikadon gamor kivin shehabankim machzirim la'adam es kaspo b'chol sha'a. He was of the opinion that the money that you deposit in the bank is considered like a pikadon, something that is literally physically present at all times, and because you can demand it from the bank anytime you want. And therefore the bechor does get a double portion. B'chol divrei haposkim shomer shekesef b'bank nechshav karoi nemarak b'bankim shebizmanam shelo hayu mitukanim kol kach kamo bizman hazeh. He says in all of those Svarim that say that a bank is like a loan and is not like a picadon, not like a deposit of collateral. We're talking about banks in earlier centuries where the banks were not FDIC insured and were not secure banks. In other words, back in the day, if you were living in Colorado and you went to the first bank of the West, and there was a good chance that Clint Eastwood would come and or not Clint, he was a good guy, but one of the cowboys was going to hold up the bank and all your money was gone, right? I don't know, sheriff. They just came and the money's gone, right? And so so you went. So those banks back in the Wild West, they were not secure, and therefore you have to view that money as a loan, not as a picadon, not as something that's a commodity that's deposited with them. Amnam b'shut yabia omer herich kiyad Hashem hatoiv alav v'daches demarav. However, Rav Ovadia rejected Rav Mashash's contention. The kaven shaksofim hufgedu al das shehabank yuchal lahotziam v'lav elu hamos sheniach lahem avihem. He says because, and Rav Ovadia's conclusion is that at the end of the day, the bank takes your money and sends it all across the world. And no one, all they know is that they have an amount that you deposited, but it's never the same money. And there's no way that you can control what they do with that money. And therefore, even in a non-interest-bearing loan, Rav Ovadia's conclusion is that any money that's deposited in the bank is called ro'i. It's not called muksa, and therefore a bechor does not get a double portion. This is really like very technical stuff we're going into now. Okay. Well, you've got the house, okay. You've got all of the chattel, all of the possessions that are in the house. You got everything that's in the safe. If the decedent owns, let's say, gold or other jewelry, things that are in the safe deposit box, all of those things, once the estate gets liquidated, the bechor gets a double portion. But anything that's not liquid at the time of death, including money in the bank, the bechor does not get a double portion. Okay. Yeah, it seems that I don't think there's such a distinction. Well, it is the house. Yeah, yeah. I think that is part of the estate. I don't think there's any such distinction because it's part of the estate. Yeah. The real assets of the business are part of the estate. So if he owns a factory and the factory has machinery and it has merchandise in the warehouse, all of that is that has to be. I don't think that has this. It doesn't. You well, let's think about that. A business has a value, right? That value is a real value at the time of his death. All it's lacking is someone to estimate its value. So therefore, that seems like to be a real asset at the time of his death. It would seem that way. I
In other
so
words, you're talking about the goodwill, all the assets that are really like physical assets.
it would seem that way. It would seem that way.
As part of the property.
I would imagine so. I would imagine so.
Yeah, but for example, I have a business, I have an operation where a company that's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
Well, if sometimes me, let's say my kids want to sell my business, they would take the multiple of what the profits are, there's a multiple that you take with the profits. there's a real value there, you know.
There is a real value, exactly. But so the only ramification, remember, the only ramification of this halacha is vis-a-vis the firstborn. Does the firstborn get a double portion in the value of the business or not? So it seems that it does, if it's actual, you can assign a real value at the time of death. So then that would be considered to be a present asset. But I would very much encourage you to make sure you all have a will. This is all of these halachos are only in situations where there's no will, and it's the wish of the testator to go according to Torah law. The heirs everyone's willing to go according to Torah law.
What part is the future? What let's say the business is bringing the value there. Then there's the actual present assets of what there's two different things you can get. The money from what is actually there. Money in the bank on your business name. There's machinery and everything else. There's sold off, and then there's the sale of a business potentially that could bring in another dollars.
Right, right. So it like you're saying, Ron, it does get complicated. What if part of the value of the business is based on the amount of money that the company has in the bank? So that's where it gets a little murky, I would say.
And you can multiply the value of whatever it is, 3 or 5 times, whatever that
Mhm,
is.
mhm.
To value your business.
Yeah.
Now you have a value for their business, and then.
Right. I'm starting to rethink this. Yeah. It could be that the value of the business is based on future returns, right? And it is based on future returns, right? That's not muhsak. That's not the present. That's not a present asset. Yeah.
Because usually if a partnership's done properly, there's a buy-sell agreement, someone dies, then they'll buy out the business at that price. So
Right.
it's that future. That's really what Ronnie is saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't have a concrete answer for you because there's really two ways to look at it. Yes, yes, I need to send you a new package as well. Okay. So he writes, he quotes a bunch of tshuvas. He quotes Hagon Rav Rafal Ankava that says that the rov minyan v'rov binyan shel poskim, the vast majority of the poskim, sfirlahu, the kesef bebank dino kiroi ve'ena b'chor notel b'hem pishnai. That any money that's in the bank is roi, it's not muchzak, and therefore the b'chor only gets a single portion. V'hosif dafilu kimli I efshar lito negdam, and no one can say I paskin differently. Chein ayin b'shut Rabbi Chaim Siriro, shegam posa kein halacha l'maisa, shein habachor notel pishnayim b'kesef shebebank, v'chein kosef mari mashash b'shut otzer hamichtavim ayin sham. Okay, let's see. As part of the real estate. Yeah. Okay, the next tshuva that we're going to be studying for tomorrow is Ha'avarat Yerushami Banim Sheinam Shomrei Torah Mitzvahs, taking away the estate inheritance from children who are not religious. Ron's going, ha, ha, ha.
Fun times.
What?
So
What's that
that's a fun topic. I like that one.
Okay, stay tuned. Stay tuned for tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. Okay, have a great day, everybody.
Teach your
Have a good day.
children well.